All right, I wanted to talk about what I call the face of socialism. When I ran public affairs for UPS, we'd meet with 22 congressmen and senators federally, and I ran that group. And my boss in DC would always say to us, do you know, should you know? And he'd ask us political questions, government questions. So that phrase always stuck with me. Do you know, should you know? Because if you care, you really should know. You got to do your research. You have to find out. Socialism always leads to tyranny, always does. And I'm going to show you what I think is a pretty good presentation on it. I'll try to get it done before 9 o'clock, let's say. Okay, if you take a look at the comparison between capitalism and socialism, capitalism has private or corporate ownership, and it's all based on individual rights. In socialism, the government has full ownership and control of the economic activities and resources, like you see with China. They buy up the heavy metals, all of that, they control everything. It's all based on equality and equity. The left uses those terms interchangeable, that everybody has equal talent and ability and should have the same house, the same things, the same car. You should all be equal. And I don't believe there's one thing equal about anybody. Look around this room, I guarantee you there isn't one person in this room equal to another person in whatever category you want to break people up. And I hate identity politics, and we'll get into that. All it does is divide and conquer and pit people against each other, but that's the goal of the left, is to keep us fighting. Here are a few quotes. The people who cast the votes don't decide an election, the people who count the votes do. Joseph Stalin said that. Doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah.
It's only about 80 years old when he said that. Lenin said, liberalism is the first step towards communism. Liberalism leads to socialism, which leads to communism. These gaps aren't very big steps. And you see how quickly this country is changing in 9 months. It's incredible how quickly they're tearing this country down. And to go from liberal to socialism to communism is not a big leap. I think they've already made the biggest leap they're going to make in this country. The scary thing is 44% of millennials prefer liberalism. And I list the differences, but basically liberals want globalism, not America first. They're non-Christians. They like big government and big debt. And what's out there, $3.5 trillion spending, which they're only going to scale back to $2 trillion, but then they'll add to it later. And I hope our elected officials stand up to this and they don't allow it. There used to be an article that I'd pull out every now and then, throw it up on Facebook, called The 7 Deadly Sins of Liberalism. I went back to look for it, it's gone. It's not there anymore. Like so many other articles I went back to that I read years ago, can't find it. I've gone on different search engines, they're removed. They're just wiping clean anything that conservatives and Christians, want to look up or read. What I remember from it, though, is that the 7 deadly sins this is what sets them off. So I practice confrontational politics. Some people don't like me because of that. I'm on your side. I'm on Bill's side. I'm on the committee side. I'm on every Republican side. But I will challenge you, and I will be confrontational to what I think doesn't support this country. And that's the way I am, and that's what I do. I will not let a liberal say something and get away with it. And sometimes what I say back, it pisses people off, even the Republicans, but too bad. I'm fighting them, and I'm going to fight them to the end. So what I remember it to be, what sets them off, and I enjoy setting them off, is you talk about guns, welfare, abortion, identity politics, the death penalty, the environment, or big government. Those are the 7 deadly sins of liberalism and socialism. That's the things that they're very passionate about. There have been a couple of articles recently that say liberals suffer more mental illness than non-liberals. Let's see a show of hands. You agree with that statement? Come on. You do agree with that. But it's been a couple of medical studies that's what they say. Liberalism is a mental illness. And if you look at my card for governor, I have a healthcare section there that liberals will be treated for their mental illness. I'm serious about that. So these are the different things that Democrats stand for. These are the different things that Republicans stand for. You can read it. You know which side you stand, which side you're on. Here's a book I saw recently, Liberalism is a Sin, and this father who's a PhD, pastor I guess, basically what the book's about is liberalism basically is to free yourself from God's rules. If you think about this country, and I read a couple of books recently, the founding fathers were so intertwined with making our laws and our Bill of Rights and our Constitution match the Bible and what the Bible says. That's what this country's about. It's not a racist country. It's not a hateful country. It's fully intertwined with the Bible. And, you know, Thomas Jefferson's letter to a church saying that the government will not interfere with your church has been turned around to be separation of church and state. That is not what he said. And Thomas Jefferson didn't craft or sign the Bill of Rights. So he has really, that was used like the left uses everything to spin it and to use it for their purposes. But that's what it's about. I also saw recently that the United States ranks 45th. This is just a couple months ago, 45th in free speech. Now think about this. Under Trump last year, we ranked 46th. They said after all they did to him and all Facebook and Twitter has done, we're a little freer now. You know, you can't believe any of these surveys that they put out. It's all done by them. Are you familiar with Ayn Rand? Atlas Shrugged. Have you read her books or the movies? If you haven't, you should get it. You know, I guess the movies are a little quicker than reading 3 books. But basically in her books, society breaks down due to equality, equity, socialism. And what happens is the owners, because there's so much socialism, the owners decide, I'm shutting my business down. They don't even shut them down, they burn them down so that the workers can't have it. And it's interesting, the thought process, and they go somewhere else, like Shangri-La. They have a place that they go, and that's where they're living, you know, on Fantasy Island. And they're leaving it to the socialists to run, and everything collapses. It's an interesting story. You take a look at socialism and communism. You had China's Cultural Revolution. Mao absolutely used identity politics. He divided everybody by their identity. The Soviet Union did the exact same thing. They advocated for equity, and millions of people were executed. I think it was close to 200 million people between those two countries were killed because they didn't think the way the government wanted them to think. And you could see that happening here. Diversity, inclusion, equity, social justice, that's Marxism being sugar-coated basically to divide and conquer. You know, and Jesus said in the Bible, divided nations will be laid to waste. The Marxist revolution, what they're trying to accomplish, it can't work until they separate the family, right? Who do your kids belong to? I saw an article this morning. New York City said your kids belong to the state, not to the parents. That's what they're trying to do, right? So they have to break up the family. They go after Christians, different institutions, and education is undermined. And you're seeing that right now. CRT, Marxism, same thing to me, dominates the right now. If you look at our country, you're seeing it in the education system. I never thought I'd see this stuff in the military, the FBI, the Justice Department, Wall Street, and the banks have all jumped on this gravy train. It's not a gravy train. They're just so afraid of being called racist that they'll sell anybody out if they think it won't hurt their sales. It's the same reason they moved manufacturing to China so that they can make so you can save 25 cents on an item in Walmart and they can increase their profits by 1 or 2%. That's what they did. How do you go to China when you have India with the same population as an English-speaking democracy, and we go and build up our enemy, which is going to be the biggest enemy we've ever faced? So their plan is to use CRT to dismantle America, free speech, religion, and Western civilization. I personally think it goes back to this guy. And there could be a lot more. You know, you had George Bush, the Clintons, all talking about the New World Order. He obviously is in the middle of it. Who knows how big this network is? You're seeing this in England. You're seeing it in Australia. You're seeing it here. It is spreading like COVID, like COVID to the 10th right now. I was talking to a publisher in Scotland who I've written some articles for years ago, and he said the same thing. He said, John, it's all here now. You know, cancel culture, it's all here in Scotland. Exactly what you've been telling me about in America, it's here now. What happened was, in 1979, Soros created Open Societies. Now, that's a long time ago, it's 42 years ago. He put $1.5 billion into Open Societies. After Trump won, he put another $18 billion into Open Societies. That's $19.5 billion. He still has $7.7 billion for himself. It's an incredible amount of money. And what he did then was, Open Societies has 199 subsidiaries. And they're spread out all over the country, all over the world, actually. And what we did, and Open Societies, Soros's money goes to Open Societies. They fund Black Lives Matters, defund the police, and other groups, and I'll get to that. The interesting thing is Eastern Europe, the old Soviet Union, Eastern Europe and Russia have banned Soros and Open Societies. Some of those countries have a warrant out for his arrest. They saw what he was about and what he's trying to do, and they have banned him. I think it's Hungary and there's another one that have an arrest warrant out for him. Here, Open Societies funds the Democracy Alliance, who funds PA United, who funds Voice of Westmoreland. I'm in Greensburg the other night. I texted Bill. There they are walking the streets. You know, I saw them wearing masks. So I stopped my car, rolled down the window. I said, you're outside. Why don't you take your masks off? They turned around with their purple shirts, Voice of Westmoreland. I said, oh, I see now why you got your mask. And I said, you know who I am? They said, no, I'm John Ventre. And they said, oh, they knew who I was. It's funny, I'm running for governor. More Democrats know who I am than Republicans, right? So, but I confront them when I see them. So, you know, April we did an event for Mastriano, and they showed up to protest. Now, the Norwin people just spoke. The two candidates locally in Norwin, if you're a resident there, do not vote for Carrie Muniz and Dana Williams. Do not vote for those two. They're Voice of Westmoreland candidates. If I can get another meeting with different candidates we didn't have here, I want to do it in Greensburg because they have 3 Voice of Westmoreland candidates there. And we got to let the public know in Greensburg, you don't vote for these 3. But on my way out, there they were protesting like that. And I had my Never Socialist shirt on because I just gave this presentation. I rolled my window down, I got out of the car, and I said, how you like my shirt? They went crazy. You know, they really did. And the one came up with one of their signs. Can you read my sign? I said, nah, I'm an old man. I can't see that far. I got in my car and I left. I didn't have my glasses on. I couldn't see the sign, to be honest with you. They're not a grassroots organization. They're the enemy, and they're beyond the gates. They're in town. They're going door by door. They have over 1,000 members. They have 500 donors. They've raised over $58,000. They've knocked on over 11,000 doors, and they've sent over 42,000 texts. This is the enemy, and this is what they do. They get into the school boards, they get into the city councils. Next thing you know, they'll be running for state reps, they'll be running for Congress, Senate, President, etc. That's what they do. And who ever thought we'd see that in Westmoreland and Western PA? 5 times stronger up in Erie. A lot of their candidates, they have 22 candidates on the November election, and a lot of them are up in Erie, but they've invaded Western Pennsylvania because they don't like the way we think and live. This is what they did recently. I think they already mentioned, we were having meetings here in this building on the silent majority, and 300 people were showing up, so they were able to figure out who some of the people in the audience was, and then they put a list out, we're gonna boycott these businesses. So if you're a Democrat, you don't eat at this restaurant, you don't buy anything at that store. It's a shame, you know, they tried to shut this meeting down for the silent majority. Sean Curtis made comments last year about the violence in America. Everything he said was true. And what did they do? They went out and they attacked Sean Curtis verbally in the paper, you know, with their comments and their letters to the editor. Doug Chu early in this year testified in Harrisburg on election integrity. Again, they went after him because they want the mail-in ballots and the drop boxes and any way they can harvest votes to cheat. Because they plan to win, and they're going to win at any cost and any way they can win. They also right now are pressuring the commissioners on how the ARP funds are spent. They want low-income housing. Unfortunately, that's part of our comprehensive plan. Is the prior commissioners, Gina, Ted, and Chuck, and Ted in particular, this was his baby, was to reimagine Westmoreland. There's 300 action steps and 38 strategies to diversify Westmoreland County. I don't know if you know that, I don't know if you agree with that. They're more than just a very loud, squeaky wheel. And the one thing I noticed is that the Trib stopped the comment section on letters to the editor. Did you notice that? You can't put comments anymore. The reason they stopped it was this. When Sean, Doug, anybody said something, did something, they would flood the paper with comments, making them look bad. They're very coordinated in their efforts and what they're trying to do. So on the November ballot, I already mentioned, you do not want to vote for Dana Williams and Carrie Muniz. In Greensburg, Salem, you have Sarah Deegan running for board member. We need to stop her. And then in the Greensburg City Council is Yuki King. To me, I don't even know what it is. It's Yucky King. And Seal Kessler. I thought it was Yucky. I actually at a meeting said Yucky, and somebody said Yuki. Whatever. But there's 3 of them there in Greensburg, and I really want to get a meeting together. I don't know if you can maybe help, and we can have a meeting in Greensburg and get the public in there to hear the people running on our side against them. But we really need to do that in Greensburg and have the other speakers that weren't here, have them come to that. You know, the committees, in my opinion, they need to go door to door. They need to work the polls. We can't allow Voice of Westmoreland candidates to get elected. We can't allow any of them to get elected. There's another group out there called No Left Turn who trains people what to do, you know, against that, to work against them. And I contacted the Trib, I think it was last week, and I emailed them and I said to them, you refer to Voice of Westmoreland as a grassroots organization. What you're doing is you're empowering them. You know, and I sent them a paragraph of this, where their money comes from. You know, by saying grassroots, oh, that's cool, they're grassroots. They started as a couple of housewives in the kitchen and now they're a big organization. They're not grassroots. They're funded all the way to the top to George Soros. I said, here's the evidence. Why don't you do some investigative journalism and out them for what they really are? The response that came back was, we're not interested where their money comes from. They go door to door, they're grassroots. And my reply was, how come every time you mention me in the Trib, I'm always referred to as in negativity terms? And that's what they do. You know, he's far right, he's a UFO nut. That's what they do every time I say something. So I said, when I take my Never Socialist group and form a 501c4, are you going to refer to me as grassroots? I didn't get a reply back. So you see where the newspaper's at. And you see what happened in Norway. This kid gets bullied and pushed around and everything, right? And that's not mentioned. I hope that kid's father sues. That's what needs to happen in that case. But they mentioned the other, he was wearing a Confederate jacket. Big deal. You live in a free country and you can wear any jacket you want. You can say anything you want in this country that doesn't incite a riot. That's what the law says. That's why I've always said the things I say, you know. But, you know, that is the law. If you don't incite a riot, you can say any damn thing you want to say. This is the face of Voice of Westmoreland, if you can see them. You have, I wish I could read it. It has their candidates there. The director is located in Sacramento, California. So that tells you something. And is employed by PA United. Their training coordinator locally is Sue Faraz-Witt, who's in Greensburg but from Philadelphia. So they've come here for their purpose to change this community. They don't like the demographics of this area, and that's too bad. What I've said at meetings is go and put your hand in your pocket, take a dollar bill out. Okay, look on the right side. What do you see? You see this symbol. This symbol says on there, you have the 13 stars for the 13 original colonies, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. That's what this country's about. You come here, you assimilate, you become an American. That's what it's about. And that is the opposite of identity politics that they're trying to shove down our throats and separate everybody by every category you can imagine. You know, it's funny, my first book I wrote years ago, 21 years ago, I talked about globalism, identity politics. I said, why don't we track people by hair color? You know, we could do that too. We can track you by eye color. I can separate you by every single characteristic you have. And that's what they're trying to do. That's what they're trying to do. Truman in 1950 said, the basis of our laws come from Moses, the Bill of Rights from Exodus. This country is so entwined with the Bible, I don't think we even realized that. I think back then, if you could go back in time, I think like every other conversation, they'd be quoting the Bible. I think that's how it was, that it was so Puritan that that's how the civilization actually was. He also said if we don't emphasize that, we will end up with a totalitarian government. And here's a quote from a different article I read. What the left has taken from us, you've allowed them to take. Because we don't fight. We go to work. We don't have time for this. You know, we're Christians, so what do? Turn the other cheek. You don't hit them back. You know, I'm not saying hit anybody. It's being filmed. I'm not saying hit anybody. But we turn the other cheek. We think everything's going to be okay. God's going to take care of it. God wanted Christian warriors. He really did. Put on the full armor of God. That's what he said. Jesus said, trade in your shroud for a sword if you need to, right? So get your head out of the sand, verbally fight back to these people. Don't let them get away with what they're doing. I published 2 books last year, and just to show you the censorship. The Wuhan Conspiracy, published March 15th, first book on COVID in America. You can look it up on Amazon, it's there. March 23rd, they took it down because the title, Wuhan Conspiracy. They wouldn't give me a reason. 2 months later, I put it up as the coronials for coronavirus. Anyone born in 2020 and on is a coronial and not a millennial. They left that up. The entire inside of the book was the same. So they took it down for the title. That's what they did. They put it back up like a week before the election. I also published the 1625 Project, a challenge to New York Times. This is about Irish slavery. The first African slaves came over in 1619. That's what you've heard about. Well, 1625, the Irish came over, and there were slaves at that time. It later became indentured servants. And then I go into the whole critical race, CRT, all of that stuff. But that's what I've done to try to counter what they say. So how do you transform America? I'm going to have to get a little closer to this one. You do it through identity politics, CRT. CRT is not a critical race theory. It's creating racial tension. That's what it stands for. And if you actually read the 1619 and follow BLM, you know that it's full of falsehoods is what it is. And this is what they say. The United States was founded on the lie of equality. They will use black, gay, and immigrant resistance to force the issue. They're going to teach a new version of history in the public schools. You see that happening. They say slavery built white fortunes in America, but yet the research I did, the economy of New York City 150, 180 years ago was bigger than the entire South. New York City alone had a larger economy than the whole South did. They say that there was horrendous suffering and sacrifice by black Americans. I agree with that. Anybody that was a slave shouldn't have been, and I'm sure that they suffered. But here's what you don't know. 350,000 Africans were brought to the United States as slaves. 335 Irish were brought also over as slaves and later indentured servants. 4.5 million Africans were brought to Brazil and the Caribbean. So what do we get? 7% of the total. Not that that's good, but we weren't the only place that had slavery back then. It was everywhere in the world had slavery. And then when they asked for reparations, 25% of all blacks today are mixed race. I think Shauna mentioned that, if she's still here, right? Most have come after the Civil War, and if you actually follow DNA, any black today is 0.7% related to a slave. And how can you figure that out? You have two parents, right? So you're 50% your parents, 25% your grandparents, 12.5% their parents, 6.2, 3.6, 175, 0.8, 0.9. That's what it is. That's the relationship. So when you do your ancestry and they say you're related to Lincoln or Napoleon, like what? 0.001? That has nothing, it means nothing. Once you get past your great-grandparents, the DNA doesn't mean very much. They say that capitalism is a tool to promote slavery, and this is their quote: white Americans shall live in eternal, irredeemable guilt for the color of their skin, their ancestors, and their nation forever. This is social Darwinism, and my response is, I've never met a slave, and I've never owned one. So that's not a big issue for me. Black Americans are entitled to compensation. We already talked about that. The founders who codified the ideals of human freedom in the Declaration of Independence were liars. America was founded as a nation intent on preserving slavery. That was the reason this country was formed. That's not the reason. It was for religious freedom was the main reason this country was formed. They say America's a racist nation, but yet that falls apart when you look at the success of Jewish people, who are the most picked on people in the world, discriminated against. They're very successful people. Their logic falls apart when you look at Asians with their test scores and graduation rates. Why? Well, we decided not to be racist with Asians. They make no sense what they talk about. And the group in this country with the highest net income are people from India. Their household income is the highest. I guess, well, we don't pick on them. So if you really look into what they say, everything they say is a lie. BLM on their website says that they're trained Marxists, they're against the family unit, and their founders are two lesbians. So you figure if you want to follow them, right? So you want to have an honest conversation on all of this. You can't do that when there's speech codes. You're supposed to tolerate uncomfortable ideas. Math, for example, is a universal code. It's used everywhere. It has to be. If there was life in space, I guarantee you, they use math if they came here. They have to use physics to come here, right? Remember when you were a kid, you'd say, I may not agree with what you say, but I'll fight for your right to say it. When's the last time you heard that? I used to say that all the time as a kid when I disagreed with somebody. Well, I disagree with you, but I'll fight for your right to say it, because that's what was said, and we repeat that. We don't say that anymore. Identity politics seeks to divide. If you've got a problem, look in the mirror. The man in the mirror is the problem. It's not other people. You can fix your own problems. And last night I spoke in Camp Hill, 4 speakers. The one guy running lived in a hut with a dirt floor in Africa, Cameroon, and he's a heart surgeon here now. It's amazing how all the speakers had a very poor background. The female running for Senate lives on a plantation, and her grandmother told her about being raising crops, and she said we had no bathrooms. It's amazing the story. The other guy, Charlie Giroux, grew up in Brazil. The stories everybody told, but and they all said, only in this country are you able to go from nothing to whatever you want to be, and when you screw up, you get another chance and another chance and another chance. That only happens in America, and that's what they said. 3 non-whites said that, and it's the truth. That is the truth. God designed the family unit for a reason. You want to know why there's a problem in the black community? Because 7 out of 10 kids grow up without their father. And why did that happen? Because of welfare. That was the reason. I've looked back in the 1950s. 93% of blacks were married in a family. 93%. It's 30% right now. They had a higher employment rate than whites. And if you look at African immigrants, like the guy last night, the heart surgeon, who came over here, they're more successful than American blacks. So this is a mentality that they're learning. That's what Americans are learning. The immigrants come over and they're driven and they're smart and they're successful. But ours want to complain, I guess, and look for handouts and get behind the Democrats who use them and don't give them what they want. But welfare is the problem, in my opinion. It has destroyed the family unit. I've always said, if you want to follow the NAACP, follow Martin Luther King, why would you follow BLM? That is a hate organization. That is a terrorist organization. Them and Antifa injured over 1,000 people last year, over 40% increase in police that were shot, 140 federal buildings that were breached, but yet we have protesters on January 6th, none of which were armed, no one got hurt, and they're tracking down every single one of them because they supported Trump. You know, we live in a country now where there's no law. And what did MLK say? I look to the day when people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Is that identity politics? We should remove identity politics from every application, every school application, right? Every college application. You should be an individual with a resume and grade point average. That's what it should be based on to go to college, for example. And that's what he advocated for. Look at who I am and not, this color of my skin. You can't see this. It's a really good slide, but, I was thinking about CRT, and I said, this is the way my mind works, what's the opposite reaction to identity politics and critical race theory? And I said, well, if they want to teach that, to hate each other, right, because we're different, well, I want to teach creation in college. Wouldn't that be the thing to teach? Creation. A couple of people said to me, you can't teach creation in school, not college, in school. It's in elementary school. And so I looked it up. 14 states teach creation. I had known that there were 2. Turns out 14 states teach creation. So Pennsylvania, if I can get elected, is going to be the 15th state that teaches creation, teaches the lies of evolution, because evolution is not true, and I can give you a whole presentation on why it's not, but we're going to teach creation in Pennsylvania. And I think that's the way you confront some of this. You got to think about what they're trying to do, then you got to come back with the opposite. I already talked the fact that I put up billboards, a newsletter. I'm trying to recruit Asians and Hispanics through my website. That's my campaign. I'm not going to talk about that tonight. And, what I'm asking people to do, because we think fairly the same, is you got to be a Christian warrior. Stop turning the other cheek. You need to resist. You need to confront them verbally. You need to boycott. The best way to stop what's going on is boycott, just like Coca-Cola, right? Everybody got upset about Coca-Cola and they boycotted. Well, there's a lot more you can boycott. The only problem is now, once Biden stole the election, corporate America got behind him with this also. And it's like, what do you buy? I said to my son the other day, I'm going to buy Japanese cars now. And I would never buy one because I buy American. I don't know if I want to buy American anymore. Because they're not with us. Corporate America is not with us. So it's a shame. It's a shame to see people and companies not stand up for what's right, but do a marketing study, and that's what they're going to stand up for. You'll get more business if you jump behind this, and this is not right. So be a crusader. That's the way I am. You know, I'm going to fight until the day I die, you know, and that's what I do. So that's my presentation. I did it kind of the quick version. Thank you. All right, if we could do another meeting before the election, you know,